What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for today. I am Sean Murphy coming at you right here from Little Caesars Arena after Detroit Pistons beat the Charlotte Hornets in dominant fashion as Cade Cunningham has yet another 20-point triple-double and shows exactly why he's right firm in the MVP conversation. I mean, look, quite frankly, in this game, it showed the difference between having Cade Cunningham as your franchise player and having LaMelo Ball as your franchise player. I thought, overall, you look at a lot of the things in this game. I thought Con Kneppel showed exactly why he was a top 5 pick for Charlotte. He came out and was shooting the laces off of the net, was absolutely electric from the court. Miles Bridges continues to be one of the best scorers for Charlotte, but overall, I think the big difference that you saw in this game was a young team that has an identity in physicality, in defense, and crashing the boards, and being able to push the transition, and, a team that doesn't, a team that isn't equipped to do that, not nearly at the same level as that of the Detroit Pistons. And I think you just saw Detroit set the tone from the physicality standpoint at the beginning of the game. And there were moments where Charlotte was able to meet that challenge. They brought it back, down to a single-digit game in the third quarter when Cade Cunningham was on the bench. And once Cade came back in the fourth, it was a completely different game. And I mean, listen, I could go in here. I could be a little bit petty if I wanted to be. I could point out LaMelo Ball struggling from the field and not having the greatest game, how he essentially had more field goal attempts than he had points, how after the first quarter he had more technical fouls than he had points. But we don't have to get into that. Let's talk more importantly, just about a lot of the things that we saw, positively from this team and exactly why this Pistons team's where it's at. Because the big reason why the Detroit Pistons are still the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference after all of this time, the reason why the Detroit Pistons are 22-6, one of the biggest reasons why is because they still have only lost 2 games in a row once this entire season. Think about that. A team 2 years ago that lost 28 games in a row, that set the NBA record for the longest losing streak in the history of the league, has only lost twice in a row, one time through the entire first 2 months of the season. That's why they're the best team in the East. That's why they're looking like a team that could potentially make a finals run based off of some of the things that we've seen. I asked JB Bickerstaff after the game why exactly he thinks this team has been able to get over that hump, so to speak, why this team has only lost twice in a row one time. And this is what he had to say after that.
JB, 2 full months into the season, this team has still only lost twice in a row, one time. Far cry from where this team was, a couple of years ago. Even just from last year, what is the biggest difference in this team's mental makeup that allows that to be the case?
Just the belief and the willingness to do what it takes, and that's important. I think for us, it's like you can't get bored with the small things that make you successful, right? And I think that's what this team has done a really good job of embracing and paying attention to. Like, we don't allow a ton of slippage. The guys hold each other accountable to the things that they know are important and the things that make us successful. So when you have that type of attitude, and when it's like through the group and nobody wants to disappoint the person next to them, you don't see a lot of mistakes. And in this league, the teams that make the least amount of mistakes typically are the teams that are going to win.
Another thing that continues to be a constant for the Detroit Pistons is Isaiah Stewart. Just the defensive ability that this guy has showcased, ever since he's come to the league, but especially these past 2 seasons under JB Bickerstaff's tutelage and under this coaching staff. It's been insane to see, yet another night where Isaiah Stewart had his impact known. He had 3 blocks in this one against Charlotte. We'll actually, in this podcast, be talking quite a bit about the impact we've seen from Isaiah Stewart thus far this season. And I remember last year, there was a press conference where I asked JB about this exact thing, and we saw JB compare Isaiah Stewart to one Ben Wallace and the defensive prestige we've seen from him. And ever since then, Isaiah Stewart's only gone to another level when we talk about his defensive prowess. He's still holding people under 50% in field goal percentage within 6 feet of the rim. And so I asked JB about this as well in pregame and what he's seen, and also just how much, he enjoys coaching on Isaiah Stewart. And this is what he had to say on that as well.
JB, last season, you compared Isaiah Stewart's development, looking more like Ben Wallace with some of his defensive instincts and timing. And it just seems like he's really gotten to that elite level of defense this year. What does some of that work really look like for him to really kind of take those steps? And how much joy as a defensive coach does it bring you to go into war with him night to night?
It's one of my favorite things to do. Every time I get to call his name, whether we're bringing him off the bench or putting him in the starting lineups. Like, I love to see Stu get out on the floor because, I know the type of energy that he's going to bring, the spirit he's going to play with, the effort he's going to play with. And I give him a ton of credit. He's done a phenomenal job of studying the game, studying his opponents, and understanding, where he needs to be in our system. But then a lot of his stuff is instincts. Like, his ability to protect the rim is instinctual. And I think that's one of the things, like the courage to do what he does. Like, he tries to block everything, right? Most guys get dunked on now. They don't want to be on Instagram or whatever, so they stop jumping. But he's fearless. So a lot of that goes to him.
First matchup against
And don't just take my word for it as far as the defensive identity, the physicality, some of those different things is why the Pistons are where they are. I actually asked Charles Lee about this before the game as well, just about, he talked about how Charlotte has struggled on the defensive side of the court, how, in order for them to get to where they want to as a team, that they're going to have to see improvements overall defensively. And so here's Charles Lee after I asked him about exactly that.
Coach, going along those points, it seems like teams like the Pistons, Oklahoma City, a lot of the young teams who have ascended towards the top of the league, seems like one of the common threads has been defense and physicality. Do you think that's going to be the main point of emphasis in order to get the Hornets from playing in territory towards the top of the Eastern Conference? And kind of how do you go about that challenge, Dave?
Yeah, I would say for us, we try to build our identity on being an elite two-way team. It starts with our veteran players, our leaders, Brandon and Melo and Miles, have kind of set a tone of that's who we want to be. And I fully support that. And I think everyone around them, when they lead by example, it becomes contagious with our group. And as you're seeing in the NBA, there's a wealth of offensive talent and skill, and everyone's able to score the ball. But if you want to be able to pull out wins, even when you are not shooting well, you got to rely on your defense. And I think that it's got to be a mindset for our group going forward as we continue to build winning habits, is the mindset that it's not all about offense. There are other ways to impact the game, and the defensive side of the ball really gives us a great chance to be able to win games.
Now, a little bit of an elephant in the room here for the Pistons is the fact that despite the fact that they won this game, that they're still, number one in the Eastern Conference, so the second best record in the NBA, is that in this one, they did not shoot the ball very well from three, and they didn't do so either in Thursday's game against Dallas. And in this one specifically, Detroit, shot 6 of 28 from three, 21%. They still won by 26 points. It was still, a dominant affair, but the Pistons would, when they get to later season scenarios, when they do have to play against teams in the clutch, and when they do, have to close out series, and whenever teams are going to inevitably clog the paint and play the zone, that is something that the Pistons are going to have to showcase that they can do. And so I asked Duncan Robinson, who is the best three-point shooter on this team, who is one of the better three-point marksmen that we have in this league, about what exactly he's seen from the Pistons in these last couple of games and what his message is in regards to the shooting slump. This is what Duncan had to say.
Duncan, Pistons get it done tonight despite, another game, kind of struggling shooting from the three as a team. What's kind of your message to your teammates, and how do you kind of get through that as a team when you are going through kind of a slump like that?
Yeah, just really trying to be process driven, understand that we got a lot of capable guys that can really make shots. I try to focus more on the shots that we're generating and making sure that they're off a good offense, ball moving, finding the open guy. The makes will come. And I know guys are working, and I know guys are capable. So it's just a matter of just staying process driven and not letting the misses compound, but instead just moving on to the next shot and the next opportunity.
Now, look, I just want to say before the game, Charles Lee actually complimented me for my bomber jacket before the pregame press conference. So I was walking out of here with a win regardless. But overall, this was a pretty dominant one from the Pistons, and it shows exactly why they've been the team that they've been this entire time. Like the defensive prowess, the physicality, Asar Thompson's impact on the game on both sides of the court. You could tell that he was playing with a little bit of a mean streak in this one. He looked like a guy who was ejected in his last game and was someone who wanted to come into this game and clearly have a positive impact because of exactly that. And I think you saw why he's one of the biggest athletic freaks on both sides of the court that we have in this league. In this game, Asar Thompson, he finished with 14 points, 5 of 8 from the field. He had 2 assists, 4 rebounds, but he also had 3 steals and 4 blocks. This guy had 7 stocks in only 26 minutes of action. That is like next level defensive dominance. Asar Thompson is one of the best perimeter defenders that we have in this league. And Isaiah Stewart's one of the best interior defenders that we have in this league. And that's one of the big reasons why the Pistons are where they're at, because they have guys who are elite at their positions when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. And Charles Lee said himself in that clip, look, we have so many guys in the NBA who can score at this point. We don't have nearly as many guys who can stop people from scoring. And if you want to talk about what's going to be one of the main characteristics for the Pistons team for years to come, and you want to talk about why I don't think what we've seen from this Pistons team can be called a fluke whatsoever, is because they control the game on the glass and they control the game on the defensive side of the court. If you can do that, it doesn't matter how well you're shooting, you're going to win most of your games in the NBA. And so in this podcast coming up, Troy and I actually do talk quite a bit more about Isaiah Stewart's performance. We talk, a good bit about more about, the rotation, what they're going to do with Dennis Jenkins, what we've seen from Jaden Ivey thus far, and also just some other teams and, what we've seen from, some really exciting action in the NBA Cup. So be sure you enjoy this podcast. Be sure you like and give subscribe as well. I will say the only thing that we didn't cover in this pod is all of the ref shenanigans that came from the Dallas game. I don't want to get myself in trouble, so I'm going to keep myself from doing that for now. But if you like this video and you like this podcast, be sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the content that we have coming up. I'm actually going to be moving to this side of the state here in 2026, so the content's going to be ramped up to a whole other level. Be sure you're subscribed because you're not going to want to miss a minute of it. Here's the rest of the episode of From Half Court.
I'm doing fine, Sean. Looking forward, of course, to the Cup championship tomorrow between the San Antonio Spurs and New York Knicks. Certainly had some good basketball on Saturday night, watching both of those two teams have victories to be able to be in the championship to play each other, especially on the Spurs end, man. We have a lot to talk about with Wemby coming back. I know he was on, 12 games, and my goodness, he looked pretty darn good against the Thunder, and the Thunder got their second loss of the year.
Yeah, I think that was one hell of a way for Wemby to come back. I don't think you could have scripted it any better, just with him, coming back against Chet Holmgren of all people in Oklahoma City. Those two very transparently do not like each other. And that definitely shows whenever those two have the opportunity to compete. We'll definitely be talking NBA Cup and everything going on league wide. But first, this is From Half Court, where primarily we come here and talk all things Detroit Pistons basketball, but the NBA as a whole as well. So if you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the content coming to the channel. But also be sure you follow us on social media at Sean Half Court so you don't miss any of the content and the coverage I have going on. But also, if you want to hear Troy's random thoughts on once in a while, just his 2026 random Jonas Jerebko thoughts, you can go at Troy Sergey 44 and you'll definitely be getting those. I mean, he's the only guy where he'll just, he'll just hop on Twitter, tweet maybe once a month or every 2 months, and somehow it'll be something about Kyle Singler. And, that's what you get from Troy Sergey, and I love it.
You're not wrong.
You're damn right I'm not. But anyways, Troy, obviously the Detroit Pistons are back from their prolonged break. They came back in dominant fashion, beat the Atlanta Hawks, but now, they're kind of heading into that time of the year where the schedule is going to get a little bit tougher. They have their West Coast road trip coming up here pretty soon. So, I feel like over the next couple of weeks, we're going to start learning a lot, about like where this Pistons team is at, kind of in the, in the hierarchy of things. I think one thing we do know for sure is, seeing that the Pistons are, one of 2 teams in the league with 20 plus wins. I don't think there's been any team that you can definitively say has been better than Detroit right now in the Eastern Conference. And I would really say it's a 2, maybe 3 team race in the Eastern Conference to get to the finals. But I mean, if the Pistons aren't in that first or second spot, to be the favorites out of the East, I don't know who is.
Right. I mean, we've seen a little bit of a gallop from the Boston Celtics. We've seen how they've been able to climb up the standings a little bit, partly because of Mr. Walsh, and Jaylen Brown has been looking really good. And the New York Knicks, of course, we knew that they'd be a threat no matter what, just because of how their roster is constructed, as well as just their disappointing Eastern Conference loss last year against the Pacers. We know that they'd be hungry, and we knew that both of those teams, even without a Jason Tatum, the Celtics would be hot. But my goodness, our Detroit Pistons have to be in that conversation, because I think, as we talked about briefly earlier before we hit record, it's just the Thunder and the Pistons who are at 20 wins so far this season, right? I mean, they're playing well. And I think how the Pistons have been able to really show improvements on the defensive end, of really lock in their opponents well. And obviously having a superstar like Cade Cunningham certainly helps your ability to win games. But it's just been a really exciting year to watch it all happen. And yeah, I mean, we are, Sean, over 25%, a quarter of the way done with the NBA season already. And we're looking as strong as we can, right? I mean, we have some weaknesses. We've talked about some of that, but I mean, if we put some, things together through playoff time, even with this roster as status quo without making any changes, I do see a long playoff run.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, when you look at everything about, like this team, they're ninth in offensive rating, they're second in defensive rating. They're one of the youngest teams in the league, but they're only 11th in pace, meaning, like they do push the pace, and they are, like faster than the average team, but at the same time, they still have a methodical way to them, that means that they're not getting sped up by anybody, and so the fact that like this team already was taking steps to become an elite defensive team last year, I'd say they've established themselves as, like one of the best defensive teams in basketball now. I mean, really the only team that's better than them defensively is Oklahoma City. And then, you look at the, you look at some of the other things, going their way. I mean, obviously we knew Cade Cunningham was, the real deal. We knew, we knew that there were a lot of guys who had the potential to take that leap. And we've talked a lot about the offensive leap from Jalen Duren, but I mean, Troy, JB said it himself that, Isaiah Stewart is establishing himself as the best defensive center in basketball. And if you look at some of the stuff he's doing offensively as well, I mean, I think Isaiah Stewart is having one of the most underrated seasons in the league.
I mean, he's just simply playing his role well, right? I mean, he's able to come into the games and, be a strong defensive presence. He's able to score the ball around the rim as well. I
think from beyond the arc.
Yeah, and right, he's made quite a few of those this season as well. I just think, when you look at how this roster is constructed, this team would be missing a lot without an Isaiah Stewart. We certainly felt that, of course, in the playoffs last year. We know how much of a value he brings to this team even before the first game of this 2025-2026 season. But, to really see him once again play that role well, contribute in ways that are winning plays, right? Winning plays are I feel like we know a different type of, play when you talk about winning basketball games and, staying on the court and things like that. So, yeah, I've been really impressed with his play this season. And one thing I have no doubt about is that, he's consistently going to be what we're seeing for the rest of the season, because we've always known that, he can play at this level and he can contribute in the way that he's been doing on both ends of the court.
Yeah, like he's always, he's always been a productive NBA player, but this is just at a completely different level on both sides of the court. I mean, offensively, if you look at some of his numbers, it's not going to like blow, it's not going to blow your world, but like if you look at the, one of the ways that you can track production is one of the ways they do it is by taking someone's averages and doing it over per 36 minutes. And if you to look at the per 36 for Isaiah Stewart, I mean, he's well up in blocks, in points, in, his efficiency is the highest it's been. This is someone who just is as complete of a player as you're going to get on this team. And to me, it's still just really a shame that for a lot of people in the league, the only thing that they know Isaiah Stewart from is the LeBron moment at LCA a couple years ago where Isaiah tasted his own blood, and obviously we saw the fury and everything that came from that. But in reality, like if you take away all the, like, which, even like the, in between whistle stuff, I feel like there's like this, reputation of Isaiah Stewart being a dirty player. But in reality, I feel like a lot of times when he does get physical on the court, he's generally retaliating, to what's being done to some of his teammates or to him.
Right. And that physicality doesn't always translate to dirty, right? And he
Right.
just, physically he brings that strong presence, I think. I think he really embodies what does it mean to be a Detroit Piston? I think he really defines that role really well. And yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of it. Of course, there's going to be stereotypes attached to your name, but we know as Pistons fans who watch, the games pretty regularly that no, this is just a competitive guy. He's a winner, he's a go-getter, and what you see is what you get as far as production and that competitive physical play. And that doesn't always mean that you have to throw the word dirty out there.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just you very clearly see, like when you watch, how Isaiah Stewart's officiated. Like when I bring up like, being perceived as dirty, I really bring up, like the reputation that a player might get, say from, officials. And even just when you look at kind of the discourse, there's almost like, like this correlation that's made between Isaiah Stewart and like a Draymond Green. But I just feel like if you just look at, they're just two completely different human beings. And this is where I can really just vouch just from, seeing Isaiah Stewart in person and, talking to him and being around him. Like it's so funny where, like on the court, he's known, for his physicality and for his strength and for being a guy that you don't want to, like trifle with. But if you were to talk to him off the court, he's one of the nicest he's known as being like one of the nicest guys on the planet. Like he's known as being the nicest guy in the locker room. So like that juxtaposition is just rather fascinating. But like, again, it's just, I feel like if you're viewing him from that lens, you're missing the reality, which is this is one of the best role players in basketball, regardless of starters or bench players.
You're right. You're right. And, I think with you, Sean, being around, the players, just with the games that you are having access to, you see that better than anyone else. And the fact that you can testify that here on the podcast, I think, speaks volumes as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, he's just having, an incredible season. And there's a lot of talk about Jalen Duren, rightfully so. But I think if you're looking at one of the big reasons why the Pistons are where they're at, why the culture is what it is, and why the locker room has, has stayed so steadfast and as strong as it has, I think you have to look at the longest tenured Piston, which is Isaiah Stewart.
Absolutely. It's just crazy that, we've seen over the last couple of years that progression of, who is the longest tenured Piston. I remember when everything, was blown up right after the COVID year, it was Sekou Doumbouya is the longest tenured Piston. How crazy is that? And then, of course, in that draft class, that 2020 draft class, we got, 3 players, we really thought we'd see on the roster for the rest of the decade. At least I kind of did. And, with Killian Hayes, Sadiq Bey, and Isaiah Stewart. But obviously we know Killian didn't work out. But Sadiq was actually the first one to go. But Beef Stew has been high production ever since his rookie year. Like seriously has been. I think he was 3rd team all rookie. Maybe even 2nd team all rookie his rookie year. And I mean, it hasn't missed a beat of how much he's contributed to this locker room and on the court production since then.
Yeah, he's been, he's been the heartbeat of the franchise ever since he's come into the building, pretty much. And I would be shocked if he's not a Piston for as long as he wants to be. Realistically, I mean, the Pistons will gladly have him in the building for a long, long time. Another guy who seems like he could be in the building for a while if he just continues this level of play and has really had a breakout year is Dennis Jenkins. Like I think I think the results are in. Like this is an NBA player, and Troy, I have a really hard time envisioning a Dennis Jenkins going back to the G League. I just don't envision him playing with the Motor City Cruise, and this is just going to be one of those things where it's going to get really interesting because as a two-way player, you can only play in 50 games contractually. Like once you reach the 50 game limit, either you have to be converted to a full standard contract or you can only play in the G League for the rest of the season. And so clearly, Dennis Jenkins is part of this rotation. And I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be, or why he wouldn't be converted from that two-way. So right now, there is Isaac Jones, who they signed earlier in the year to kind of fill that last roster spot. He's actually been the one that's been playing quite a bit with the Motor City Cruise. So I wouldn't be shocked if he was converted to a two-way and then Dennis was brought onto the regular roster. But like, all that to say, it's like, how do you even find a spot for like a Marcus Sasser when you have someone like Dennis who's clearly just having this breakout year?
Certainly something that we're going to continue keeping an eye on and talking about. But you're right. I mean, certainly that backup point guard spot is pretty heavy focus with numbers right now. And but Dennis Jenkins is a guy that you definitely don't want to see walk away, or, you know, playing G League games. He's shown himself, as you pointed out, that he deserves a spot in this league, and not just a spot in the league, but on this Detroit Pistons team, this Detroit Pistons roster, where he's able to go in and contribute. And you know, certainly with the games that we've seen so far, 25 games in, Sean, I really like what he brings to the table, especially with his scoring, his ability to pass the ball. He's an unselfish player. All of those things are really helpful when you talk about a guy that can, you know, contribute wins in the win column for this team.
Yeah, and especially when you're still figuring out what exactly you can expect and what you're going to be getting from a Jaden Ivey night in, night out. And especially when you know, like Marcus Sasser has almost kind of been like a box of chocolates where you really don't know what you're going to get, you know, just about every night. Like it's, you need those guys that you can, you know, dependably know what you're going to get each and every night. And he's a dependable jump shooter. Like he's never scared, you know, as a scorer. He's shown a lot of improvements in finding his angles and, you know, like driving to the basket and, you know, like preventing, you know, his shot from getting blocked, which, you know, that's really big, especially for a lot of these undersized guards. That's why Jalen Brunson is so effective when he gets towards the cup and is, you know, and is scoring in the paint himself. So, yeah, I just, when looking at, you know, a lot of the things that Dennis has done, I think he's further and further cementing himself into this rotation, but on this roster for years to come. And I didn't think I would be saying this, let alone in December, but like, if you were to say, hey, Sean, between Dennis Jenkins, Jaden Ivey, and Marcus Sasser, which is the one that you are most confident is going to be on the Pistons within a calendar year? The fact I'm saying Dennis Jenkins is crazy.
And
But
not
that's a
just
testament to what he's done.
right. And not just that, you know, but I mean, the season started not even 8 weeks ago, right? And just to the fact in the last 6.5 weeks, you've been able to say that. That shows too of his consistency, and that shows too the value to the win column, but also still the question marks around the other two players. I mean, that plays into that, you know, fun question that you asked too, of really why we're having that question and why we're so confident with Dennis Jenkins is because of the question marks that hang around Ivy and Sasser.
Yeah. And with Jaden Ivey, obviously, I think it's still important to, you know, to express, you know, like patience and, you know, like proceed with caution in regards to how to converse about the Jaden Ivey situation, because look, he's still clearly, he hasn't even played 20 minutes yet. The most he's played was actually, you know, against Atlanta at home on Friday. He played 18 minutes and 42 seconds. That was probably, you know, other than, you know, the game in Milwaukee, that was probably his best performance thus far, as you know, ever since coming back. You know, it definitely hasn't been like pretty, you know, to start, and there's still a lot of, you know, like areas where you can just tell that the rust is still there. I think it's just objectively fair to just question, you know, like as the season goes on, if you don't see the growth continue to materialize, I think it is natural to question, like, for his development, does he need to go to a situation that will have more grace and more opportunity? But what have you made kind of over the last few games, you know, as Ivy's kind of been working his way back. Like, what have you made of his progression from when he started back to now? And is that someone that, like, are you raising any alarm bells in any way?
Yeah, certainly. You mentioned the word rust. I think that would be, if I had to define, the last he's been back, I think 8 or 9 games.
Yeah, he
That would
just played his 10th game.
10th game. Okay, gotcha. That would kind of be how I would define certainly those 10 games would be the rust. But at least I see, especially the Atlanta game. I can't remember his exact stat line in the Atlanta game, but at least he looked a little more smooth, I thought, on the offensive end. Go ahead.
Yeah, he had 10 points, 4 assists, shot 5 of 8 from the field, 5 of 6 inside the arc. He did have the 4 fouls, but those fouls were really weird, and a lot of them were just timing based,
Sure.
and not just being a split second off.
Right.
Like that, like pretty much every foul.
Right. And part of those fouling at any level, high school, college, or NBA, sometimes that just can contribute to being aggressive, right? When you're aggressive, when you're flying all over the place, you're going to hit bodies, you're going to get called. I don't take, that into too much consideration, but smooth was my word, just because of, 5 for 8, just being able to get to his spots. And I thought that was something that, I noticed from especially that Atlanta game. But as far as you said, red flags, does it raise any concern moving forward? Yeah, a little bit, just because I don't know when I'm going to see truly Jaden Ivey back. The guy from before the injury, right? Before the day of 2025. And, obviously what we're seeing on the court, it's flashes of what we know Jaden Ivey to be, but anyone who remembers his play, not only last year, but the year before that, even though the Pistons, didn't have a good record to show. Ivey really showed significant improvement towards the end of the year, started off, not playing as much, of course, that was the Monty year, but, we know that what Jaden Ivey can contribute. We know his floor, at least, and the fact that we're not even really seeing the floor full out, of course it raises red flags, Sean. But I don't really know if there's a deadline in my mind of, okay, if things aren't well at this exact point, maybe look at what's out there on the trade market. But do you have a date? That you're thinking of okay, if I haven't seen significant growth or ability to heal and be comfortable, I'm going to have major concerns. Have you thought of a date, Sean?
I honestly think it's through the season. I think it's I still think with how much talent is there and how much upside we've seen in the past with, a Jaden Ivey, I think it's just clear that, he's very much still working his way back and trying to trust his body again, which that's just a whole other piece of the journey. I think if you're Detroit, I think you would be kicking yourself if in a year he starts to look more and more like the Jaden Ivey you've seen in years past. And, like you could have had that guy in-house when, it's just like with Philly, where they went and paid max dollars for Paul George when Tobias Harris has been every bit better. And, like they probably would have been better off if they just kept Tobias in-house. But, I still think, especially with, Oklahoma, I still point back to Oklahoma City with Josh Giddey, because it took them losing in the playoffs, getting through a series for them to know for a fact that they had to move on from Josh Giddey. And I think they waited for the right time, because when you look at how good of a prospect Josh Giddey is, he's clearly showing why he was drafted top 6, right now in Chicago. But, it's just clear, especially if you watched that team, a year or two ago, or 2 seasons ago now, it was just clear that if they were going to take the next step, he was just not ready to be that player they needed him to be, And so I think, especially with Jaden, even if he does come back and still show some of those things we've seen from his floor, I think you still just need to see it come postseason, because he's the only guy in your young core you haven't seen play in the postseason yet.
Right. And I think the Giddey comparison's good. it's just kind of that PTSD, right, from being a Piston fan, looking over the years of Chris Middleton, right, how his career took off in Milwaukee. I mean, even Spencer Dinwiddie, for God's sakes, had some sparks, throughout his tenure after he left Detroit. Another one, even Christian Wood got some really high playing time and production after we let him go. So, you certainly don't want that to have at any level, Jaden Ivey, especially if it's someone in your own conference, that you lose him to, because he seems very happy in Detroit, right? He seems to get along and at least fit well on this roster, but we also know, again, with your Oklahoma City example, at least, that's almost what made them explode, even more so to, competitive high basketball production as we saw them win a championship last year, right? So, we'll have to see.
Yeah. I think one thing we do know is just the closer we get to the deadline, as the season goes on further and further, and as we hear more from behind the scenes, and also, even just, in the public stratosphere, like, it just feels like the Pistons are not positioning themselves to go make a big move at the deadline. It really feels like, if anything, it's going to be very similar to last year, where you go and get like a Dennis Schroeder type, or, another like quality rotation player that can assist you, come the postseason. But I think it just makes a lot more sense to make any significant decisions about your roster come the summer, for multiple reasons. For one, there's, like, figuring out what's gonna happen with Jaden Ivey, because depending on how he looks come the end of this season, the range of what he can sign for contract wise is very wide. And for Jalen Duren, if he makes like all-star team, and who knows if he makes all NBA, that money just gets, that price tag just goes up and up and up. Not to mention that you're going to have to pay a SAR in a year. You're going to have to pay Ron in 2. So like, there's those things looming, but additionally, like, as we've heard from JB, on Run It Back with Michelle Beadle, Chandler Parsons, and as we've just heard in general from a lot of these other places, like, the Pistons clearly feel that this is a team that deserves the opportunity to see what it's capable of as constructed. And there has been nothing over the last year, especially over the last couple of months, and especially since the season has started, that has said, okay, now it's time for the Pistons to go and make a move and give up some of these players and break up what is fundamentally not broken.
Right. And, when you look at just the core of the Detroit Pistons right now, you brought up, just 3 names in that one, conversation, Sean, of Ron Holland and Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren. And of course, the fourth one being Cade Cunningham, that you really absolutely, you would call at this point untouchables right now, just because of the value that they bring, to your team. And then who's the odd man out, right? I mean, it's Ivy, unfortunately. And that's, of course, no harp on him. But when you talk about this being a business price tag, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if I go Ron untouchable. I mean, Ron's great. I would say, like, it'd have to be the right circle. But nonetheless, if you're talking about the hierarchy of the priority and like who you feel good about, Ivy's not in the top 4 right now.
Right. And one that you want to see pan out too, before you talk about, extensions and all of that. You want to keep Ron on the roster before you have to make any of those decisions.
Well, yeah. I mean, the big point is you have a lot of contract decisions coming in a very short period of time. And the reality of it is, especially why an Anthony Davis makes 0 sense if you're talking about like potential trade candidates and all those different things. Anthony Davis is eligible for an extension this summer. And assuming he's going to want the max, which players, generally speaking, never enter those negotiations by saying, hey, what's the lowest amount of money you can give me? By his age 37 season, Anthony Davis would be making near, if not more than $70 million. And if you're just talking about a salary decision, that could immediately cannibalize or paralyze whatever future prospects this team has, that's it right there.
Absolutely. I mean, and I mean, you have to bring up the fact too. Say you do get him, you pay him that money, right? And then he's injured for a year. He breaks an ACL, right? I mean, is that out of the question? Of course it's not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy has a very injury prone, NBA tenure, and then you're really screwed.
I would say, like I just want to be as fair as possible here.
Let's do it.
I think when you look at Anthony Davis's injury luck in Dallas, I think Nico Harrison deserves the majority of the blame there.
Sure.
Specifically, they rushed him back from the oblique and abdominal injury that he had, last year, which caused him to miss, significant time. Before he got to Dallas, he played 42 games with the Lakers that year. And then he also played 76 of the 82 the year before with LA. So when he was with a good health, when he was with a good training staff, when he was in a good organization that was actually looking out for his well-being, he actually was playing games. But on the other hand, Anthony Davis is 32. And
not getting younger.
Exactly. So the amount of games played isn't going to be heading in this direction. Even then, if he does play games, it's not like the quality is going to be going this way either. It's going to be going down for our audio listeners.
And with that being said, this team with this first year, right? I mean, leading the Eastern Conference in wins, this team is going up. So we want to watch it continue to go up. And I just feel like if you bring in that type of player, to the organization, you're cashing in way too early and might not even win the prize.
Yeah. And I think unless there's a crazy scenario where someone's available that you just don't expect, I just don't foresee these massive names being moved in high numbers like we've seen over the years past, just because I think you're seeing around the league, I think you're seeing teams, especially with how OKC's doing things at the moment and how Indiana's done things and, things like that. I think teams are prioritizing the draft and having first round picks so much more than they have in years past, even having first round picks late in the first round, because in this current NBA, where the salary cap system is so messed up, and I do think is going to need some correction come next CBA, because I do think you're starting to see it hurt the league a little bit. You're seeing teams less willing to give up first round picks because this is essentially, for a lot of these teams, your only feasible path to patching whatever holes you have, or, possibly getting, a player that can, complement you going forward. Like Milwaukee, for example, they're in a super tough position because they're getting older. They don't really have many or really any picks to speak of. And it's not like there's really anyone that they can go get that's at a quality on the open market that you're going to get at a discount. The only way you're getting a good player at a premium rate in the NBA is through the draft.
Right. And I think teams have watched, at least, teams like Phoenix, right? Throw away some of those first round picks like they're nothing, and then really suffer and regret that later on. So, I think that's a lesson to be learned as well. And also, making the blockbuster trade doesn't solve your franchise. I mean, we talk about the Mavericks too, and Nico and all of that, but it's not like the Lakers are the front runner yet in the Western Conference either. I mean, they look great and really good this year as compared to last year. But there's still San Antonio, there's still Oklahoma City, right? I mean, there's still some really competitive teams out there that they're going to have to get past. So making that blockbuster trade and putting assets doesn't always fix your problems either. Maybe the LA was a bad example, but not a blockbuster trade doesn't solve all your problems is my big point.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. I looked up a list of the biggest, some of the most significant trades in the NBA since 2020. just to get an idea of how many of them were actually, like beneficial for both teams. So obviously there's Luka to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. That's the one everyone thinks of. I think that will work out pretty well for LA in the long term. That's the exception though, not the rule. Kevin Durant to Phoenix. Phoenix got a lot of praise and everyone was really excited at the time. What did it get him? James Harden to the Sixers.
Nothing there.
Yep. I mean, you could even just say James Harden to the Clippers. Throw it in there as well. I mean, honestly, James Harden's been the saving grace of the Clippers. Drew Holiday to Boston. Obviously, that one was pretty huge. I don't think anyone in the league, I don't think anyone outside of the dialed in NBA fan base would have said, "Whoa, what a trade!" Like that's I don't even think that really counts in the stratosphere of what we're talking about. Indiana did go get Tyrese and Pascal in 2022 and 2024, respectively. That's probably the best moves that have been made as far as trades go. But I mean, really, other than that, you have Aaron Gordon to Denver, Derek White to Boston, and Andrew Wiggins to the Warriors. So, like, you don't really have like all-star names getting traded, and causing like significant movement in the form of a championship. If anything, the trades we've seen, like Damian Lillard going to Milwaukee, that was a disaster. We saw Jimmy Butler, get traded to Golden State. You could argue they probably peaked at the end of last season. And the biggest and one of the biggest trades that's happened in the NBA over the last like half decade plus, Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland, which I think everyone in Detroit was really jealous and envious of when it happened. Troy, let's keep it a buck. What has Cleveland gotten out of that trade?
What has Cleveland gotten? Right.
I mean,
a really good NBA record.
How far have they gotten because of that trade?
Only second round.
Mm-hmm. And they gave up how many picks?
A little more comfortable than I would be willing to give up, Sean.
And currently they're the 8th seed. They have the same record as the Atlanta Hawks, and they're technically below the Philadelphia 76ers.
I think,
and they're one of the only teams in the second apron.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sean, that comparison is probably the best because you look at Donovan Mitchell's a very talented player. I mean,
awesome.
It's nothing against Donovan Mitchell that we're talking about here. It's what what they gave up to get, and how even though in theory it set your franchise forward because a guy like Donovan Mitchell is on your team, it in reality and in practice actually set your franchise back because you have not a lot to hang your hat on, or not really any insurance besides Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I think the big moral of the story here is if you push your chips in the middle of the table, you better be 100% certain that this is a championship nucleus. And I think if there's anything we've seen from the Cleveland Cavaliers thus far this season, it's that this is not it. Like, unless things radically change, which, listen, we're still only like, they're 27 games into their season. There's 82 games. For all we know, Darius Garland can get back, to feeling healthier. They can get guys, back into the lineup, like Max Strus, and, like they do have, some pieces that they can re-implement, and they can start heading in the right direction. But Evan Mobley hasn't exactly looked like the guy that everyone's touted him to be throughout the years. Donovan Mitchell, as good as he is, he can only do so much. Jared Allen might be a redundancy at this point with Evan Mobley. They might have to consider, what it looks like post, like post Jared Allen in Cleveland. And Darius Garland, I mean, I don't know what's happening with the turf toe thing, but like ever since he's had to deal with that, he just unfortunately hasn't exactly been the same guy. I mean, he looked better the other night in their OT loss. But like even that, like, oh yeah, OT loss where they didn't even score a single bucket against Charlotte in overtime.
It's unheard of. That's genuinely unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for one, I mean, it says it all when you're going to overtime with Charlotte. But I mean, like, and like you look at things like, yeah, they're top 10 off, like they're 10th in offense, they're 10th in defense. This team should be a heck of a lot better than 10th in offense, though, with what they have at their disposal. So like all that to say, like when you really look at the Eastern Conference and like who should scare the Pistons, like, yeah, like don't get me wrong, if you face Cleveland in the first round, or like if you face Cleveland in the playoffs, like that is certainly a formidable foe. You're gonna have to, be prepared. But I think if you're talking about who's the most likely, like, or who are the teams that you're scared of in the East right now, it's New York, it's maybe Boston, and it's maybe Orlando. But even then, Orlando's starting to get banged up. Toronto's starting to come back to reality. Miami's offense isn't as great as everyone says it is. This conference is just not that threatening at the moment.
Right, which certainly gives all the encouragement and opportunity in the world for this Detroit Pistons team to really continue playing high basketball and making a push in the playoffs this year, and not cashing in on a player during the trade. Keeping what we have, because what we clearly have is translating to wins.
Yep, for sure. And I mean, especially right now, it's like, okay, like what move do they need to make to get, like, who do they need to surpass in the East by making a move at the trade deadline? Like even if they do somehow get to the finals, like at that point, first of all, it really just comes down to like, who can win in the best of 7 series. At that point, pretty much anything can happen. But I don't think anyone was having the expectation of the Pistons competing for a title this year. So even I think that's just like that. Like I don't think anyone in sports operates, under like the, hey, we're just happy to be here. But like, you could be kind of happy to be there. What I'm saying? Like, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And oh man, and I love our coaching staff too. I just love that JB's at the helm of all of this, right? We got the right coach at the right time. We just have not been able to say that over the last 10, 15 years with this.
What I'm kind of surprised hasn't really started up yet.
What's that?
I think there needs to be more buzz about Luke Walton as like a potential coaching candidate going into next year. Like I think I've talked about it before on this podcast, but like even just going and reading, I've been reading a book about the LeBron era with the Lakers. Hold on, let me look up the book, the name of the book, because it's called A Hollywood Ending. It's by hold on, I'm sorry, by Yaron Weitzman. And it talks about, it actually details, like the end of the Luke Walton era with the Lakers and how the rug was really kind of pulled under him in terms of he thought he was going to have this group that he could, develop and have time to help like implement his culture, which that just didn't happen. And then, he pretty much had, this exact same thing happen to him in Sacramento with, with the worst owner in basketball. So, I think Luke Walton deserves another chance to coach in this league, because he's clearly shown in multiple spots that he's one of the best assistants in the game. He's clearly someone that's really well respected and really well liked throughout the league. And I feel like if you put him in the right organization, I think he would be a phenomenal coach.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, I had pretty decent seats against Pistons versus Pacers here in Indy. And I tell you, being close, I was on, the Pistons side, with the bench. And he was kind of the energizer of that bench and the coaching staff. I mean, the players just looked at him with the utmost respect, just a really high energy, basketball junkie kind of guy. And when you talk about, coaching opportunities in the league, really those types of personalities are your best coaches.
Yeah, no question. So if I'm a team, obviously it's still really early, in the season, there's, only one team that's made a coaching change. So I imagine we're quite a ways away from looking at like potential destinations, but it's like, I mean, I think one potential situation I would love for Luke Walton I know Dallas is going to be looking for a new general manager this summer. There's kind of there's some rumors about the possibility of Jason Kidd moving to the front office in the summer. Could you imagine Luke Walton getting to coach Cooper Flag and whoever they get in the lottery next year? Like, could you imagine if he got that opportunity to really do it right in Dallas?
It would be really cool. I just would hate to see him go. I think he's helped a lot with this team so far. As happy as I would be for him, dude, he makes this team really good.
Yeah, no, he's as good of a head assistant as you can have in the league. And him and JB just work extremely well together. JB's been, nothing but complimentary of Luke Walton and the impact that he's had on his coaching career. And obviously he had a big impact when he was in Cleveland. He's having a huge impact now here in Detroit. And he had that stretch where he coached Golden State, to that really impressive start to the season when Steve Kerr was away from the team. So like this isn't anything new as far as Luke Walton's concerned. And who knows, maybe he's happy, being an assistant. But I would imagine as a competitor and, as someone who, like loves coaching, everyone wants, their shot at the head chair at some point in some way. And, I think, if I'm a, young team that's, continuing to try to like establish ourselves, like I think he's someone that has to be considered.
You're absolutely right. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens. But also at the same time, when you talk about the Pistons making a playoff run, when you talk about the Pistons, really turning some heads this postseason, I really think we see time and time again, year after year, coaching gets exposed for the good and the bad during the playoffs. And I just think we have the right coaches where we're not going to be exposed because there's nothing to expose. We have good coaches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's really no bad things to say about what's going on in Detroit at the moment. And I think they, clearly, I think, ownership clearly is starting to have a lot of trust in what's happening in the front office. And there's clearly a good working relationship between the front office and the coaching staff. Like they're checking all of the boxes that you need to check when you're talking about a organization that's, continuing to establish itself and, all signs of a healthy organization is what I'm really trying to say. Now,
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Victor Wembanyama coming back, the San Antonio Spurs. Troy, I think the Spurs might low-key already be the second best team in the West. Like, when Wemby's healthy, when this group's got it going on all cylinders, mind you, that game against the Cup, against OKC in the Cup, not only was that the first time that we saw Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and Wemby play together, that was the first time they practiced together. And then they went out and did that against OKC. I mean, the wealth of scoring that this group has, the fact that I think they went 9-5 when Wemby was out, which is insane. Like the conversation around this team has been, the Spurs go as far as Wemby takes them, and I still think that's mostly true. But it's time to stop talking about the Spurs as just Wemby's team. This is starting to look like what could be the formations of by far the most credible threat to the Thunder for years to come in the West. And I think potentially what could be the start of one of the greatest rivalries in the history of basketball.
You're right. And why I'm, laughing, not out of disagreement, but out of agreement, because if you watch that game, Sean, I mean, the Thunder started off really hot. They looked like control of the game in the first half. Towards the end of the second quarter, the Spurs had a nice little run, and then it was, back and forth for quite a bit of the second half. But Wemby just had it together. And we talk about how good the Thunder's defense is. I think that there was some difficulty on the Thunder's defensive end, but maybe that's just magnifying how good San Antonio can be when everything's clicking on the offensive end. And you're right, there's no necessarily superstar pairing along with Wemby, but there's some darn good NBA players, and Stephen Castle is going to be one of them. Obviously, Darren Fox, we know, very capable, high scoring, impact player in this league, all-star, I believe, once or twice.
Yep.
So, that is really good, pairing. But at the same time, Sean, you're right that I really think the Spurs are emerging as the second. And I mentioned that earlier when talking about Luka and, the Lakers cashing in on him. And, obviously he's a player that you'd want to cash in on, but it doesn't automatically make them the front runner of the conference in any way, shape, or form, especially when you have a team like the Thunder and the Spurs in your own conference. And yeah, Wemby, I think before we were, we hit live, I said Wemby on the defensive end, there was moments at the game on Saturday night where it looked like he was, playing against third graders, just how he was blocking the shots and just, player would come down the rim and he would just put his hand up and it would be going the other way, and effortless. And you talk about a playoff series, we'd be in, imagine if that's the Western Conference Finals, which there's a darn good chance it could be.
Dude,
that series is going 6 or 7 regardless.
We could be getting that as a Western Conference Finals every year for the next decade. And if that's the case, sign me the up. Like, sign me up. I'll take it every time.
Yeah. And that's even without saying how fun, flashes of the Rockets have been, and, how the Nuggets and Joker's been proving that he's still the best player in the world, right? Even though the Nuggets, aren't obviously the top of the conference, the Nuggets are looking awesome too. So the fact that still, as good as those teams are playing, it's not enough to even make the conference final. Again, we don't know that yet. We're making assumptions there, but at least
and a lot of it, in my opinion, like the reason why I put Denver. So like if I were to put it in tiers right now, okay, I would put tier 1, OKC, tier 2. You probably have to put San Antonio and Denver. Like San Antonio, Denver, and Houston are probably that tier 2. Reason why, like I put like Denver just below like the Spurs, and why they're not quite up there at the top, because I think if they were fully healthy, they're probably still the second best team in the West until proven otherwise. Aaron Gordon's hamstring injury and the lack of certainty of when he's going to be able to come back and what he's going to be able to do for them come postseason time, because it's the one thing for him to like recover and come back from the hamstring injury. It's a whole other thing for him to be able to be ready to play 30 plus minutes a night and to rely on that hamstring holding up. Like if Aaron Gordon is not on the court, the Denver Nuggets are just not the same team. Whereas, with San Antonio, obviously there's the health questions of Wemby. I think some of him missing the last month or last couple of weeks have just kind of been precautionary with the calf. In Houston, obviously there's a lot of really good stuff there, with having Kevin Durant and the athletes and the scoring that they have. I think the Lakers are very clearly a step below these teams. And I would say they're probably in the same tier as Minnesota, where you have this electric offensive superstar as your centerpiece, but you are clearly fundamentally flawed, where you are not even entering the same conversation as these teams up top.
And yeah, I was going to bring them up. We talked about them quite a bit last podcast, but the team that I'm probably, if I was, their organization, I'd be, beating my head against the wall, is the Minnesota Timberwolves, just because there's not a lot of options to put them in tier 1 right now. There's just none. There's really nothing they can do to jump up there. They have Anthony Edwards, which makes them want to be in tier 1, which shows that they, at least have talent and a talented star that can take you where you want to be. The same guy, Anthony Edwards, took this team to the Western Conference Finals. So we obviously, if you're a Timberwolves fan, you like that. You like what you've seen him be able to do. But yeah, you don't have the resources right now to make, a contender happen at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like the big move that they took a couple years ago, excuse me, was to go get Rob Dillingham. And we talked about it a little bit last week. He's averaging 4.3 points on his career. And unfortunately, his average was higher his rookie year. So it's not heading the right direction. And like when you made that move, it was like that was pretty much like one of their last big moves that they had going forward. It's like you better be right about him. And they very much were not. And so now it's like, again, like when you look like when you compare the athleticism of these other teams, when you compare the offensive firepower and, the complementary pieces, because if we're just talking solely the best player on each team, you're putting Anthony Edwards like up against each and every one of these guys, especially in a 7-game series. You feel pretty good about your chances. And then you fill out the rest of the rosters and you look at what these other teams have. And again, I don't want to be too negative here, but this is starting to look a hell of a lot like the Kevin Garnett era in Minnesota with the fact that they had those conference finals runs. They looked like they could be the best of the West for years to come. And then reality sets in. Teams like Houston start to ascend. Teams like OKC start to establish their dominance. San Antonio comes out of nowhere. Luka goes to LA. And that's not even mentioning the fact that you have teams like Dallas with Cooper Flag, where probably they could be competing for a conference finals in like 3 or 4 years.
You're absolutely right, Sean. And that's just the unfortunate, the reality of the NBA, of your window. The window to make moves, the windows to compete, the windows to establish yourself as a contender even. It's so short. Think of the Denver Nuggets. Awesome NBA Finals run, won the championship in 2023. They haven't even been back to the Western Conference Finals since then.
Yep. Milwaukee only won 2 playoff series after winning the championship.
And that was already over 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago.
Yep. I remember after like and this is just something that stuck with my head. I remember like after the Bucks won the championship, I was on Twitter Spaces and listening to Bucks fans celebrate, and like they were talking about in the moment. They're like, "We really did it," and like we're just gonna keep coming back here. We're just gonna keep being in this same spot. Like we're just gonna keep winning championships. If it was that easy, everyone would just be, everyone would just be winning championships left and right. Everyone would be in that prime spot. But like the reality of it is, like I remember Dan Campbell said a couple years ago after the Lions lost the NFC title game, he said we might never get back. And the Lions fans were like, what are you talking about? Like we're gonna get back next year. Like we're gonna stroll right back in. Not how sports work, man. Because when the season's done, all 30 teams in the league in the NBA are going to be looking at the open market, are going to be looking at every other team going, how can I be better than them? And they're not going to be laying on their hands.
It's the reality of sports, and especially with this, we've talked so much about this in previous months, but like the collective bargain agreement, that's just the nature of the league even more than it has been in years past.
Yep. And again, that's why the Pistons being as, as diligent as they can be and, being as, mindful of what numbers they give out, because Cade Cunningham, a guy like that, yeah, you sign the check, you feel good about it, and you go from there. But the number you give Jalen Duren is going to say a lot about what you're going to be able to do going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So a lot of interesting conversations and stories to follow. We're definitely going to be following them right here on From Half Court. So definitely be sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of that. Troy, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court.